Corridors of death, on elephant deaths on tracks. Elephants are victims of train collisions and electric fences in rising man-animal conflicts. The death of 5 elephants, 4 of them cows, caused by trains colliding with them, and all within a week, has again highlighted the gaps in efforts to reduce man-animal conflicts in the country. On November 26, the first accident occurred near Madurai in Coimbatore district, Tamil Nadu, that has seen many an elephant death on a rail track stretch that extends up to Kanjikode, Kerala. The second accident was near Jaga Road in Assam's Morrigaon district, 4 days later. Both accidents were at night. Elephant deaths in railway accidents are not new in India. A reply by the Project Elephant Division of the Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in May to a set of RTI questions highlighted reasons other than natural causes, as having led to the killing of 1,160 elephants. Over 11 years ending December 2020, 741 deaths were due to electrocution, railway accidents accounted for 186 cases, poaching 169 and poisoning 64. The pattern of train accidents involving elephants has been studied by different stakeholders, including the railways, forest and wildlife departments and activists, especially with regard to the Madurai stretch. That a greater number of casualties getting reported are in elephant passages has been confirmed by the C&AG in its latest compliance audit report on the Ministry of Railways. There are effective solutions in the case of 2 causes, electrocution and train hits. Installing hanging solar-powered fences, as has been planned in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and planting citronella and lemongrass, as done in Golaghat district, Assam, to deter elephants are some of the large-scale options. The authorities should ensure that there are no illegal electric fences or barbed wire fences, which, instead, can be replaced with the solar-powered ones. Needless to say, the participation of local communities is crucial. The critical role elephants play in biodiversity conservation must be highlighted, especially to those living in areas close to elephant corridors. The Environment Ministry and Ministry of Railways should also expedite proposals for elevated wildlife crossings or eco-bridges and underpasses for the safe passage of animals. A finding of the C&AG was that after the construction of underpasses and overpasses in the areas under the jurisdiction of East Central and Northeast Frontier Railways, there was no death reported. The authorities should also expedite other recommendations made by the C&AG, such as a periodic review of identification of elephant passages, more sensitization programs for railway staff, standardization of track signage, installation of an animal detection system, a transmitter collars, and honeybee sound-emitting devices near all identified elephant passages. Of the 29,964 elephants in India, nearly 14,580 are in the southern region, and the state governments concerned and the centre need to find lasting solutions to the problem of man-animal conflicts. COP27 in Egypt must focus on food systems. In any reimagination of food systems, now unequal and strained, the world has to factor in climate change adaptation. The United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, held in Glasgow between October 31 and November 12, 2021, with a huge gathering, generating headlines, criticisms, and some commitments. Governments did commit to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and put forth a record-shattering U.S. $356 million in new support from contributing national and regional governments to protect the most vulnerable. But this is not enough to stay below the limit of 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. COP26 fell far short of the groundbreaking success many had hoped for. Our fragile planet is hanging by a thread. It is time to go into emergency mode, or our chance of reaching net zero will itself be zero, said UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. He added that we must build the resilience of vulnerable communities against the here and now impacts of climate change, and make good on the $100 billion climate finance commitment to support developing countries. Climate crisis and hunger. The agenda of ending world hunger and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030 is facing formidable challenges, as the climate crisis and hunger are linked inextricably, and that along with several major drivers have put the world off track. This has been more so after the COVID-19 pandemic has doubled the population under chronic hunger from 130 million to 270 million. Analysis by the United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, shows that a 2 degrees Celsius rise in average global temperature from pre-industrial levels will see a staggering 189 million additional people in the grip of hunger. Vulnerable communities, a vast majority of whom rely on subsistence agriculture, fishing, and livestock, and who contribute the least to the climate crisis, will continue to bear the brunt of the impacts with limited means to cushion the blow. The absence of social protection measures, such as food safety nets, forces the food insecure to depend on humanitarian aid for survival. Across the world, up to 811 million people do not have enough food, and as per the recent WFP estimates, 41 million people in 43 countries are at risk of sliding into famine. The poor and the vulnerable continue to be hardest hit. Even though they contribute least to greenhouse gas emissions, people in low-income countries face the worst impacts. The top 10 most food-insecure countries contribute 0.08% of global carbon emissions. Crop failures, water scarcity, and declining nutrition threaten millions who rely on agriculture, fishing, and livestock. It must be reiterated that they are those who contribute the least to the climate crisis. The climate crisis will impact food production and livelihoods, but also, as per the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, report, threaten nutrition through multi-breadbasket failures. Adaptation is urgent. Adaptation and resilience building for poor and vulnerable communities are critical for food security. The focus though has been on reducing emissions and targets related, as these are essential to protect livelihoods and the food security of millions. In its outcome document, the conference took note of how climate and weather extremes and their adverse impacts on people and nature will continue to increase with rising temperatures. There is a strong emphasis on the urgency of scaling up action and support, including finance, capacity building, and technology transfer, to enhance adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce vulnerability to climate change in line with the best available science, and considering the priorities and needs of developing country parties. Significantly, the statement welcomes the national adaptation plans that deepen the understanding and implementation of adaptation actions and priorities. This is an area where India has a huge role to play with its ongoing and now substantial policy work at the national and state levels. The outcome document also extends an invitation to the IPCC to present at the COP27 in Egypt the findings from the contribution of Working Group 2 to its 6th assessment report, including adaptation needs to further the understanding of global, regional, and local impacts of climate change, response options, and adaptation needs. Adaptation Finance. The recent pledges made by the developed countries on enhancing climate finance to support adaptation in developing countries to adjust to worsening climate crisis impacts were welcomed in the outcome document from COP26. It observed that the contributions made to the Adaptation Fund and the Least Developed Countries Fund represent significant progress when compared with previous efforts. The current climate finance for adaptation and base of stakeholders remain insufficient to respond to worsening climate change impacts. COP calls upon multilateral development banks, other financial institutions, and the private sector to enhance finance mobilization to deliver the scale of resources needed to achieve climate plans, particularly for adaptation, and encourages parties to continue to explore innovative approaches and instruments for mobilizing finance for adaptation from private sources. Mr. Guterres, at an emergency summit in Milan, Italy, at the end of September, had called for funding for developing nations, 50% for adaptation and resilience to the climate crisis. He said, adaptation needs are increasing every year. Developing countries already need $70 billion for adaptation, and that figure could more than quadruple to $300 billion a year by the end of this decade. The WFP is working with communities to adapt to the changing climate that threatens their ability to grow food, secure incomes, and withstand shocks. It has supported 39 governments, helping them realize their national climate ambitions. In 2020, the WFP implemented climate risk management solutions in 28 countries, which benefited more than 6 million people so that they are better prepared for climate shocks and stresses and can recover faster. In India, the WFP and the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, and Forestry are planning to develop a best practice model on adaptation and mitigation with potential support from the Adaptation Fund. Here are a few key areas or measures we should focus on. First, creating resilient livelihoods and food security solutions by protecting and improving the livelihood of vulnerable communities. Second, the adaptation of climate-resilient food crops, such as millets, for nutritional security. Third, enabling women's control and ownership of production processes and assets and increased value addition and local solutions. Fourth, promoting a resilient agriculture sector by creating sustainable opportunities, access to finance, and innovation for smallholder farmers, with climate information and preparedness. Fifth, building capacity and knowledge of civil society and governments for vulnerability analysis to increase food security by addressing the link between food security and climate risk. Fixing broken food systems. The climate crisis impacts all parts of the global food system, from production to consumption. It destroys land and crops, kills livestock, depletes fisheries, and cuts off transport to markets. This impacts food production, availability, diversity, access, and safety. At the same time, food systems impact the environment and are a driver of climate change. COP26 came after the pioneering UN Food Systems Summit in September, which was a wake-up call that food systems are unequal, strained, or broken as 811 million people are going to bed hungry. The United Nations Special Envoy for Food Systems Summit, Agnes Kalibata, has called for an unprecedented focus on food systems, food and agriculture, by ensuring that COP27 has a dedicated focus on this. Reimagining food systems requires us to look at food systems through the prism of climate change adaptation and mitigation, which must also entail making them resilient to climate change and pandemics while making them green and sustainable. We are on the cusp of transformation to make the world free of hunger by 2030 and deliver promises for Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, with strong cooperation and partnership between governments, citizens, civil society organizations, and the private sector. This requires reimagining the food system towards balancing growth and sustainability, mitigating climate change, ensuring healthy, safe, quality, and affordable food, with investment from governments and the private sector in supporting farmers while maintaining biodiversity, improving resilience, and offering attractive income and work environment to smallholders and youth. Recast this apples and oranges ranking method. The NIIF's ranking of state-run and centrally funded higher education institutions on a common scale is problematic. The ranking of state-run higher education institutions, HAES, together with centrally funded institutions such as the Indian Institutes of Technology, LITs, the Indian Institute of Science, the National Institutes of Technology, central universities, etc. using the National Institutional Ranking Framework, or the NIIF, a methodology adopted by the Ministry of Education, Government of India, to rank institutions of higher education in India, is akin to comparing apples and oranges. The outline, institute data. The NIIF outlines a methodology to rank HAES across the country, which is based on a set of metrics for the ranking of Hays, as agreed upon by a core committee of experts set up by the then Ministry of Human Resources Development, now the Ministry of Education, Government of India. The rationale to compare state universities and colleges with the Ivy League of India, to which the central government is committed to sponsoring resources and infrastructure, is inexplicable. The central government earmarked the sums 7,686 Indian rupees crore and 7,643.26 Indian rupees crore to the LITs and central universities, respectively, in the Union Budget 2021. According to an All India Survey on Higher Education, AISHE, 2019-20 report, there are 1,043 Hays. Of these, 48 are central universities, 135 are institutions of national importance, 1 is a central open university, 386 are state public universities, 5 are institutions under the State Legislature Act, 14 are state open universities, 327 are state private universities, 1 is a state private open university, 36 are government deemed universities, 10 are government aided deemed universities, and 80 are private deemed universities. A close study of this data shows that 184 are centrally funded institutions out of 1,043 Hays in the country, to which the Government of India generously allocates its financial resources in contrast to inadequate financial support provided by state governments to their respective state public universities and colleges. Ironically, out of the total student enrollment, the number of undergraduate students is the largest, 13,97,527, in state public universities, followed by state open universities, 9,22,944. Deficiencies in the focus. The financial health of state-sponsored Hays is an open secret, with salary and pension liabilities barely being managed. Hence, rating such institutions vis-à-vis centrally funded institutions does not make any sense. Interestingly, no agency carries out a cost-benefit analysis of state versus centrally funded Hays on economic indicators, such as return on investment the government made into them vis-à-vis the contribution of their students in nation-building parameters such as the number of students who passed out serving in rural areas, Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities of the country, and bringing relief to common man. While students who pass out of elite institutions generally prefer to move abroad in search of higher studies and better career prospects, a majority of state Hays contribute immensely in building the local economy. Given the challenges state Hays face in their day-to-day functioning, the NIIF seems to have taken cognizance of only the strength of institutions while completely disregarding the problems and the impediments they encounter, hence, disallowing a level playing field to state universities and colleges vis-à-vis their centrally funded counterparts. It must be noted that 420 universities in India are located in rural areas. Scarce resources and the lackadaisical attitude of states preclude such institutions from competing with centrally sponsored and strategically located Hays. Ranking parameters. The NIIF ranks Hays on 5 parameters: teaching, learning and resources, research and professional practice, graduation outcome, outreach and inclusivity, and perception. To take stock of the situation, let us first analyze 2 important NIIF parameters in the context of state Hays. Teaching, learning and resources includes metrics viz. Student strength including doctoral students, faculty-student ratio with an emphasis on permanent faculty, a combined metric for faculty with the qualification of PhD or equivalent, and experience, and financial resources and their utilization. In the absence of adequate faculty strength, most state Hays lag behind in this crucial NIIF parameter for ranking. The depleting strength of teachers, from 15,18,813, 2015-16 to 15,03,156, 2019-20, as a result of continuous retirement and low recruitment, has further weakened the faculty-student ratio with an emphasis on permanent faculty in Hays. Research and professional practice encompasses a combined metric for publications, a combined metric for quality of publications, intellectual property rights, patents, and the footprint of projects, professional practice, and executive development programs. As most laboratories need drastic modernization in keeping pace with today's market demand, it is no wonder that state Hays fare miserably in this parameter, as well while pitted against central institutions. Interestingly, the share of PhD students is the highest in state public universities, i.e. 29.8%, followed by institutes of national importance, 23.2%, deemed universities private, 13.9%, and central universities, 13.6%, while the funds state Hays receive are much less when compared to centrally funded institutions. As quality research publications and the number of patents filed in state Hays are contingent on well-equipped laboratories, modern libraries, and generously funded infrastructure, it is imperative for policymakers to reorient financial allocation strategies towards state Hays. Similarly, 3 other NIIF parameters too offer little opportunity for state Hays to compete with their better and conveniently placed competitors for ranking. The total enrollment in higher education has been estimated to be 38.5 million, 19.6 million boys and 18.9 million girls. Female students constitute 49% of the total enrollment. Where state Hays struggle. There is another aspect. State Hays are struggling to embrace emerging technologies involving artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchains, smart boards, handheld computing devices, adaptive computer testing for student development, and other forms of educational software hardware to remain relevant as per the new education policy. Therefore, when these two are put together, ranking Hays on a common scale purely based on strengths without taking note of the challenges and the weaknesses they face is not justified. It is time the NIIF plans an appropriate mechanism to rate the output and the performance of institutes in light of their constraints and the resources available to them. A white touch to a refreshed green revolution. The Amul model, of a socio-economic enterprise, has immense potential to aid India's crop-growing farmers. November 26, 2021 was celebrated in Anand, Gujarat, as the 100th birth anniversary of Verghese Kurian, the leader of India's White Revolution, which increased the incomes and the wealth of millions of cattle-owning small farmers in India, many of them women. November 26, 2021 also marked 1 year from the day when thousands of crop-growing farmers, who have been the beneficiaries of the Green Revolution, which increased their incomes, began a non-violent protest to force the Indian government to withdraw the new laws it made to undo the policies of the Green Revolution. The government's new policies intended to double incomes of small farmers, which have been languishing while stock markets are soaring. The protesting farmers feared the new policies would enable corporations to make more profits and marginalize farmers further. The government must now go back to the drawing board to find better ways to increase farmers' incomes. Revolutions, varied purposes. The contrast between the two revolutions provides valuable insights. Their purposes were different. The purpose of the Green Revolution was to increase the output of agriculture to prevent shortages of food. The purpose of the White Revolution was to increase the incomes of small farmers in Gujarat, not the output of milk. The Green Revolution was largely a technocratic enterprise driven by science and the principles of efficiency. Whereas, the White Revolution was a socio-economic enterprise driven by political leaders and principles of equity. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and Tribhuvandas Keshibai Patel had a vision of a cooperative movement of Gujarati farmers for increasing their incomes. Verghese Kurian recounts in his autobiography, "I too had a dream," how they enrolled him in their visionary enterprise and how he became a servant of the farmers for whose sake the enterprise was created, and amongst whom he lived. Amul has become one of India's most loved brands, and is respected internationally too for the quality of its products and the efficiency of its management. It has successfully competed with the world's largest corporations and their well-established brands. The fledgling, farmer-owned, Indian enterprise the two Patels sponsored had many technological problems to solve. That is why they enrolled Kurian, who had studied engineering in the United States, on a Government of India scholarship. Kurian and his engineering compatriots in the organization were compelled to develop solutions indigenously when Indian policymakers, influenced by foreign experts, said Indians could not make it. Equity was key. Kurian's accounts of the political battles he fought for Make in India, and of the can-do spirit and innovation of Indian engineers, are inspiring. However, as he repeatedly emphasizes, the enterprise achieved its outcome of empowering farmers because the governance of the enterprise to achieve equity was always kept in the foreground, with the efficiency of its production processes in the background, as a means to the outcome. The Green Revolution's aim was to increase outputs by applying scientific breakthroughs with methods of management to obtain economies through scale. It required inputs, like chemical fertilizers, to be produced on scale and at low cost. Therefore, large fertilizer factories were set up for the Green Revolution. And large dams and irrigation systems were also required to feed water on a large scale. Monocropping on fields was necessary to apply all appropriate inputs, seeds, fertilizer, water, etc., on scale. Focus on only 1 or 2 crops at a time enabled their outputs to be increased by avoiding diversion of land use to other non-essential crops. Monocropping increased the efficiency in application of inputs. Thus, farms became like large, dedicated engineering factories designed to produce large volumes efficiently. Diversity in the products and processes of large factories creates complexity. Therefore, diversity is weeded out to keep the factories well focused on the outputs they are designed for. Similarly, in large-scale farms and plantations, any plants other than those the farm is designed to produce on scale are weeds. On productivity. In large, modern factories, workers are only a means for producing outputs. Workers are replaced by machines whenever possible to increase outputs more efficiently. Thus, productivity, when defined as output per worker, can be increased by eliminating workers. This may be an acceptable way to measure and increase productivity when the purpose of the enterprise is to increase profits of investors in the enterprise. It is a wrong approach to productivity when the purpose of the enterprise is to enable more workers to increase their incomes, which must be the aim of any policy to increase small farmers' incomes. The need for new solutions to increase farmers' incomes has become imperative. Moreover, fundamental changes in economics and management sciences are necessary to reverse the degradation of the planet's natural environment that has taken place with the application of modern technological solutions and management methods for the pursuit of economic growth. IRMA, or the Institute of Rural Management Anand, which Kurian had founded to develop a new breed of manager for increasing the well-being of farmers, convened a workshop to celebrate his 100th birth anniversary to discover what can be learned from the White Revolution to regreen the Green one. Leaders of on-the-ground movements, who are applying the principles of cooperative management in natural, environmentally suitable farming around India, assemble to distill insights for better economic policies and better management methods to increase inclusion and improve environmental sustainability. The guidelines. The first insight is, inclusion and equity in governance must be hardwired into the design of the enterprise. Increase in the incomes and wealth of the workers and small asset owners in the enterprise must be the purpose of the enterprise, rather than production of better returns for investors. The second, the social side of the enterprise is as important as its business side. Therefore, new metrics of performance must be used, and many non-corporate methods of management learned and applied to strengthen its social fabric. The third, solutions must be local system solutions, rather than global or national scale solutions. The resources in the local environment, including local workers, must be the principal resources of the enterprise. The enterprise must be embedded in the local community from whom it gets its environmental resources, and whose well-being it must nourish by its operations. The fourth, science must be practical and usable by the people on the ground rather than a science developed by experts to convince other experts. Moreover, people on the ground are often better scientists from whom scientists in universities can learn useful science. The fifth, sustainable transformations are brought about by a steady process of evolution, not by drastic revolution. Like strong drugs to treat specific ailments, large-scale transformations imposed from the top can have strong side effects too. They slowly weaken the patient's health, as the scientific managerial solutions of the Green Revolution have harmed the soil and water resources of northern India. Large-scale farming using modern scientific methods was the approach in the Soviet Union to improve agricultural outputs, as it is in the United States, and it achieved equally spectacular results. However, it wiped out peasants in the Soviet Union and has swept off small farmers in the US. Kurian told Premier of the USSR, Alexei Kosygin, who visited him in Anand, that top-down ownership of enterprises, whether by the state in the Soviet model or by remote investors in the capitalist model, was the wrong solution. The essence of democratic economic governance is that an enterprise must be of the people, for the people, and governed by the people too. Breathing fresh air into the NCR's pollution control. Revisiting the UN Environment Programme's review of China's strategy provides useful lessons for policymakers. Experts frame environmental concerns in technical terms, pollutants, their monitoring and penalties, whereas air pollution in cities is driven by urban form and transport infrastructure. Solutions depend on the stage of development. The National Green Tribunal, NGT, had begun the process of taking a new look at an old problem by asking the government to list its causes. For example, there is a report that the NGT directed the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change to modify the National Clean Air Programme, NCAP, which proposes 20% to 30% reduction of air pollution by 2024. But the NCAP, with its collaborative and participatory approach, monitoring, targets, emergency measures, and even role for international organizations, has still to make an impact. Just a day ago, on December 2nd, the Supreme Court of India asked pertinent questions. Despite the compliance reports, why are the results on the ground negligible, and what is the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region doing? At a hearing where the court gave the centre and Delhi government 24 hours to come out with suggestions to control air pollution, the Solicitor General's response was that the Commission's power structure needed reworking, to which an exasperated court asked for creativity. This exchange raises the fundamental question about the role of the Commission, what it should be doing, and not just what it has done, as it has not been responding to interdependent causes driven by complex urban problems. Urban transformation is a social process, people, services, lifestyles, rather than a physical problem, congestion, technology, regulation. Therefore, the focus of the Commission has to be on how cities are organized, which in turn requires collaboration between multiple stakeholders. The challenge is to move away from solutions that merely require coordination between discrete administrative units, and enforcement taking the matter to the courts. Lessons from Beijing. The UN Environment Programme's review of Beijing's control of air pollution provides useful lessons for policymakers. The population size of both cities, Beijing and Delhi, is comparable. Delhi also shares with Beijing, and other cities, the three stages in dealing with urban air pollution as a long-term task. It starts with end-of-pipe air pollution control, gradually moving to integrated measures targeting primary pollutants, SO2, NO2, PM10, and CO, with the government playing the main role. Later, secondary pollutants, or particulate matter leading to smog, primarily PM2.5, become the main focus for control with a regional coordination mechanism. The similarity ends there. The review by the UN points to a management system characterized by systematic planning, strong monitoring capacity, local standards, specific enforcement mechanism, and public awareness. First, the key result area is a new model of network operation and quality control to provide early warning to effectively reduce the level of pollution under adverse weather conditions. In case of forecasted heavy pollution, warnings are issued at least 24 hours in advance through the media, in addition to daily air quality reports and forecasts. The technical system combines high-resolution satellite, remote sensing and laser radar, an integrated network combining air-land data for quality monitoring with greater analytical capacity, and over 1,000 PM2.5 sensors throughout the city to accurately identify high-emission areas and periods. Approach to urbanization. Second, in Beijing what really made a difference was not shutting down polluting units, restricting car ownership and travel, and improved fuel standards, but the approach to urbanization. Smart cities such as New York, London and Beijing provide more space for public transport, and mixed land use spatial planning minimizing travel. The problems of Beijing and Delhi, as transit centers with no peak hour traffic, require additional measures. Beijing's 7th Ring Road to ease congestion is 1,000 kilometers long, and even before buildings came up, the metro link was operational. Beijing already has more than 550 kilometers of metro, more than 1.5 times that of the Delhi metro. The plans are to have 1,000 kilometers of metro rail. The bus transport system has 30,000 low-floor buses, more than 8 times the number with the Delhi Transport Corporation. In China, 72% of travel is completed by public transport compared with 37% in Japan, 17% in Europe, and 10% in the US. Vehicle policy. Third, when it comes to air pollution, particulate matter is the most difficult to control, leads to smog and serious health issues, and is largely caused by vehicle emissions. Traffic has been identified as a distinct and growing challenge. Systematic study on PM 2.5 source apportionment in Beijing has found that local emissions constituted two-thirds of this, of which vehicle emissions were nearly half the main source. Regional transport contributes to pollution on heavily polluted days. On-road diesel vehicles formed the largest part of mobile sources, and the policy focus gradually changed from gasoline vehicle emissions to heavy-duty diesel vehicle emissions. Phasing out older vehicles made the most significant contribution. Beijing plans to have 48 lakh charging points by 2022 to push the use of electric vehicles. Delhi has nearly 2 times the number of registered vehicles than Beijing, increasing at a faster pace, and source apportionment is still being debated. Fourth, innovative implementation steps were instituted in Beijing. Local regulation targeted controlling both the concentration and total emission amount, leading to transforming and upgrading the industrial structure, production processes, and equipment. Economic incentives were tailored to the specific problem, with attractive levels of subsidies to high-polluting enterprises to close their production, and differentiated fees charged according to the concentration of waste gas emissions for those who chose to remain in production. Enforcement at the municipal and state levels is coordinated, with each level having different responsibilities, and a mechanism for cooperation. Municipal environmental enforcement teams do specific inspections and hotspot grid supervision based on a detailed emission inventory for each source, passing on serious cases to the state level. Lastly, independent evaluations review the air quality management system, conduct quantitative assessments of the pollution reduction effects in selected areas, analyze new challenges, and provide recommendations for enabling further improvement in air quality and building public support. The problem in the NCR is not the peculiar mix of administrative levels. It is their common approach to air pollution with cosmetic steps, unverified claims, statistical compliance, and shifting responsibility, which the powerful Commission has failed to override with a joint plan to modify trends. Should the state stop focusing on population control? India has a large young population which needs access to contraception, not family planning. According to the recently released National Family Health Survey, NFHS-5, India's total fertility rate, TFR, which is the number of children a woman would have in the course of her life, is 2, a decrease from 2.2 in NFHS-4. Is this cause for cheer, and should women be credited with stabilizing the population? Poonam Matrejja and S. Iridaya discuss whether governments should stop focusing on population control in a conversation moderated by Serena Josephine M. Edited excerpts. India launched its national program for family planning in 1952. What are the factors that have helped the country bring down its TFR? Poonam Matrejja, yes, it was good that India had an early start. But while India has the oldest family planning program, it does not have the best or even an average program. I'd first like to give credit to the women and their aspirations. The men have demonstrated that they are not responsible for family planning and rarely support women in family planning decisions. The decline is on expected lines. If you look at NFHS-4, women, on average, wanted 1.8 children. So, it's just that we have a huge unmet need for family planning. It was 13% in NFHS-4. In NFHS-5, it has come down to close to 10% on average in many states. There are 16.4 million abortions every year, which I think is an underestimate and a proxy for contraception. So, there is determination in India in spite of men not participating. Having said that, I do want to say that in the last 5 or 6 years, we've had new methods introduced, though we need to do a lot better on numbers, and we need more temporary methods. Another reason for women having or desiring fewer children is education. It is the best contraceptive pill, and better education means women will have fewer children. There are many factors for the drop in TFR, but I'd like to give maximum credit to women. Also, fertility has come down across religious lines. S. Iridaya, though I agree that the program was managed by women because the sterilization rate among women is extremely high compared to that of men, the fertility decline is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new era. Most policymakers and journalists think that when you achieve a fertility rate of 2.1, the population policy is over. Unfortunately, the population policy is not just a fertility control policy. We have to educate our administrators and policymakers that population policy includes not just fertility, but also mortality and migration. These are the 3 components of population growth. This is the beginning of the work that the government has to do in terms of child nutrition, child mortality, and providing employment for the youth, what we call the demographic dividend. I don't think it is time to celebrate the NFHS-5 results. Many view this drop in TFR as a sign of population stabilization. Is that really so? S. Iridaya, I don't think it is a sign of population stability. Kerala, for instance, has almost the same replacement level of fertility for close to 30 years now. We have not stabilized, the population is still growing. Population momentum will set in right now and continue for perhaps a few years or a decade. Only then can we talk about population stabilization. Basically, population momentum means that the population will continue to grow, and it is not going to have a negative growth rate. Kerala still has a positive growth rate, and we expect a negative growth rate maybe after the 2031 to 2041 census. It will take several decades for India to reach population stabilization. This is the first point. As I said earlier, this fertility decline is not going to end the story of India's human development. Even as we discuss the low fertility rate, According to the data, 23% of women were married before 18 years. The percentage of women aged 15 to 19 years who were already mothers or pregnant at the time of survey was 6.8. However, adolescent fertility rate for women aged 15 to 19 years was 43. This is only the beginning of a new era in India's population policy. It is very important for us to wait and do more work than what we have done so that we have healthy women, healthy children, and a healthy society. At this point in time, does India need a population control law or drastic measures such as the two-child norm proposed by Uttar Pradesh and Assam? Do you think the country should move away from coercive measures for population control, keeping in mind the lessons learned from China's one-child policy that was scrapped a few years ago? Poonam Matraja, if there's anything in the news in the NFHS, it is that it's taking the wind out of those who are saying India needs coercive population control measures. India needs to move away from not only the coercive measures it has, but shouldn't even think about population control measures. Let me explain why. First, Kerala, Tamil Nadu and other states that have achieved a TFR of 2 have done so without coercion. Second, we are going to have a balance in India as migrants from Bihar and UP are already moving to the southern parts. The country will balance its population even when we reach a minus growth rate. Let there be a secular decline, which is already happening. In fact, 70% of the population is going to be fueled by population momentum, as we have a very young population. We need to provide 3 or 4 things keeping them in mind. Our population policy needs to get more spacing methods, which are long-lasting. A large percentage, if you look at people's access to family planning, depends on where you live, what your wealth quintile is and what your age is. Younger girls have the least access to family planning services and so, there are high teenage pregnancies. We need to not only increase the age of marriage, but keep girls in school and university for their own empowerment and growth. If we keep focusing on coercion, we will not focus on the right things. We are barely talking about aging. Those who are talking about coercive policies in UP and Assam haven't thought about investing in aging and improving the health systems. If we use coercive methods and use the population to create greater disharmony, if we victimize or demonize one particular population, we should remember the emergency and the impact that forced sterilizations had. The biggest lesson from that is that we shouldn't be talking about population control or population in a coercive manner. Iridaya Rajan, we should not do politics with fertility. We should talk about the quality of family planning services, which is pathetic. Family planning programs have been about following the women. They have the first child, then the second. In between they probably have one abortion, as there was no method of contraception. And then sterilization. We should change this and propagate temporary methods of contraception among men and women. We need innovations in family planning programs. What do you think of incentives and disincentives in family planning? Poonam Matraja, there is no evidence to show that linking incentives and disincentives to family planning and social schemes work globally. In India, we invest so much money in incentives for sterilization. That's part of the problem why women are not able to have the number of children that they wish to have. They have more children than they wish to have and go through multiple abortions, which impacts their health. Abortion-related mortality is close to 8%. Iridaya Rajan, I am against providing incentives. I think people are addicted to the two-child family. We should think of new ideas of how to promote the quality of family planning services. Historically, if you look at India's family planning program, we started with the cafeteria approach, where you can ask what they have and choose. Now, you will be told there's only sterilization, and not many are promoting other methods. Many couples are using abortion as a contraceptive method. This indicates that we have failed to promote temporary methods. The use of contraceptives has improved, as per the latest NFHS, but male sterilization continues to be low. What are the implications of the continued thrust on women with regard to family planning? Poonam Matraja, once again, NFHS 5 proves that women are taking more responsibility, and men are taking less. How do we change men? There are myths about adopting contraception. I don't believe coercion is needed, but we need more communication on behavioral change. We have to change social norms, especially among the younger population, but we don't even have sex education. Much of our population momentum is going to come from the young. We should recognize that the overuse of female sterilization has been adversely impacting women's health. Iridaya Rajan, we have to start educating women as well because some do not want their husbands to be sterilized. Family planning should be converted into family welfare. A family includes men and women. We should recognize this in our data collection. I think we have to do more research on women and men. We should convert that into a family affair. Probably then we will succeed. So, if not population control, what should be the focus areas? Poonam Matraja, I think there's going to be the targeting of one minority community, which is the reason behind the population control push. As Professor Rajan said, we shouldn't do politics in population. Given that India has a strong preference for sons and an aversion for daughters, our sex ratios will get more skewed. I don't believe that on the whole, the population will decline faster. It will just distract us from all the good things that we are talking about doing, such as expanding choice and social indicators like age at marriage. Iridaya Rajan, there are two important components. One, what we are celebrating is that in India people are living longer. Now, living longer is being celebrated because it gives you the Human Development Index. But we are only adding years to the people, not a better quality of life for our senior citizens. Second, migration is going to play a major role in India. My estimate is that right now, 600 million people are internal migrants. But we don't have any policy on migration. We should look at population policy beyond fertility. We should include mortality decline, quality of life in old age, and create a migration policy. What is the way ahead in terms of population control, family planning, and in men taking greater responsibility in adopting sterilization? Poonam Matraja, the family planning budget is only 6% of the health budget. Within that, we spent 2.5% on temporary methods of contraception. The money spent on incentives is 60% of the budget. This can instead be used on bringing about behavioral change. We have to recognize that India is going to keep growing because of a young population. And they don't need family planning, they need access to contraception.